Subscribe to StoryLab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Arrest. The crack of gunfire echoed across the shooting range as Jeremy Brooks adjusted his stance, emptying the magazine with practiced precision. 15 years of suburban life hadn't dulled his reflexes. Each shot found its mark dead center. The familiar weight of the Sig Sauer in his hands felt like coming home. Jeremy Brooks. The voice cut through the afternoon calm like a blade. Step away from the weapon and put your hands where I can see them. Jeremy set the pistol down slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. 3 men in dark suits approached, badges gleaming in the afternoon sun. CVD, Criminal Investigation Division. His pulse remained steady as he raised his hands, muscle memory from a different life, keeping him calm. The lead agent, a stocky man with graying temples, stepped forward. Agent Keith Novak, CID. You're under arrest for domestic terrorism and threatening federal officials. Jeremy's face remained impassive as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. On whose complaint? Novak's lips curled into a smirk. Your wife and daughter reported you, Brooks. Said you've been making threats, stockpiling weapons. They're willing to testify against you in court. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Carmen and Kara, his wife of 16 years and his 15-year-old daughter, had turned him in. Jeremy said nothing as they led him to the unmarked sedan, his mind already working through the implications. At the federal building, they processed him like any common criminal. Fingerprints, photos, the works. The interrogation room was sterile and cold, designed to break men down. Agent Novak sat across from him, a thick file spread between them. This is serious, Brooks. Domestic terrorism carries a life sentence. But if you cooperate, tell us about your weapons cache, your plans. Maybe we can work something out. Jeremy leaned back in his chair, studying the man across from him. I want my one phone call. Novak laughed, the sound harsh in the small room. Who could you possibly call? Your wife's the one who turned you in. Your neighbors think you're a psychopath. Face it, Brooks, you're alone. The call, Jeremy repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Something in his tone made Novak's smile falter. He gestured to another agent, who brought in an old rotary phone. Jeremy dialed from memory, a number he hadn't used in over a decade. It's a private matter, he said when the voice answered. Then he hung up. An hour later, the interrogation room door burst open with such force it bounced off the wall. A tall man in an expensive suit stormed in, his face flushed with anger. Uncuff him this instant. Will Garner, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, pointed at Jeremy's restraints with trembling fingers. Novak stammered, Sir, I don't understand. Uncuff him now. Garner's voice boomed through the building. As the confused agents fumbled with keys, Garner leaned close to Novak. Then I want you to arrest his wife. Immediately. Sir, on what charges? Garner's eyes were ice-cold steel. Conspiracy against a federal agent. She just burned one of our most valuable assets. Chapter 2. The Ghost in the Machine. 20 years earlier, Jeremy Brooks had been someone else entirely. Fresh out of West Point, the 22-year-old lieutenant had been recruited into a world that officially didn't exist. His psychological profile was perfect, high intelligence, unshakable loyalty, and a moral flexibility that allowed him to do what others couldn't. The CIA had shaped him into a weapon. Languages, combat, infiltration, psychological warfare. Jeremy absorbed it all. He became a man they sent when diplomatic solutions failed and military options were too visible. For 8 years, he existed in the shadows between nations, cleaning up messes that could never see daylight. Then he met Carmen Schaefer. She was a nurse at Walter Reed, treating soldiers broken by wars they couldn't discuss. Beautiful, compassionate, untouched by the darkness that had become Jeremy's world. For the first time in his adult life, he wanted something beyond his next mission. The transition hadn't been easy. The agency didn't let people just walk away, but Jeremy had leverage, too many secrets, too many operations that needed to stay buried. Director Garner, then just a section chief, had personally overseen Jeremy's extraction from active duty. You disappear completely, Garner had warned. New identity, new life. But if we ever need you, You'll know how to find me, Jeremy had agreed. He became a construction contractor, building the suburban dream he'd never thought he wanted. Carmen never questioned his military pension or his reluctance to discuss his service. She was content with the man who came home every night, who coached Little League and attended PTA meetings. Kara had been born a year after their marriage. His beautiful, brilliant daughter who inherited her mother's compassion and his strategic mind. For 15 years, Jeremy had been the perfect husband and father, burying his past so deep he'd almost convinced himself it didn't exist. Almost. Now, sitting in Will Garner's car as they drove through the Virginia countryside, Jeremy felt the old training reasserting itself. His civilian mask was cracking, revealing the predator beneath. "We need to talk," Garner said, pulling into an abandoned warehouse. "What you don't know could get you killed." Inside, Garner activated a signal jammer and faced the man he'd known as both Jeremy Brooks and a dozen other identities. "Your wife's been compromised for months. We've been monitoring the situation." Jeremy's jaw tightened. "How long have you known?" 6 months. "We picked up chatter. Someone was digging into your background, trying to confirm your identity. We traced it back to her affair." The word hit like a physical blow. Affair. Simon Callahan, successful attorney, handles some very unsavory clients, including several who have reasons to want you dead. Garner pulled out a tablet, swiping through surveillance photos. "Your wife doesn't know who she's sleeping with, but Callahan knows exactly who she's married to." Jeremy studied the images. Carmen and a distinguished man with silver hair entering hotels, restaurants, his home. The timestamps went back 8 months. He's using her. More than that, he's been slowly poisoning her against you, convincing her you're dangerous. The domestic terrorism report was his idea. Get you arrested, discredited, isolated. Then he planned to have you killed in custody. And Kara. Garner's expression softened slightly. She believes what her mother told her. She thinks she's protecting everyone by helping with the arrest. Jeremy closed his eyes, feeling the last vestiges of his civilian life crumble. When he opened them again, Will Garner saw a man he recognized, cold, calculating, lethal. "I need everything you have on Callahan," Jeremy said quietly. "Every client, every case, every skeleton in his closet." "Jeremy, think about what you're saying. You have a daughter to consider." "I have a daughter who thinks I'm a terrorist because her mother chose to believe a stranger over the man who's loved her for 16 years. Jeremy's voice carried the chill of winter. "Some betrayals can't be forgiven, Will. Not even from family." Chapter 3. The Unraveling. Carmen Brooks sat in the federal holding cell, her mind reeling. How had helping the authorities report Jeremy's erratic behavior led to her own arrest? The charges made no sense. Conspiracy against a federal agent? Jeremy was a construction contractor, not a federal agent. Mrs. Brooks, a young attorney, entered the visiting room. "I'm Eric McCarthy, public defender. I've been assigned to your case." Carmen clutched his hands desperately. "This is all a mistake. My husband's been acting strange, stockpiling weapons, making threats. I was trying to protect my daughter." McCarthy consulted his notes. "According to the prosecution, your husband is a former CIA operative. Did you know this?" The words didn't register at first. "That's impossible. Jeremy builds houses. He's never been anything," but she stopped, memories flooding back. His nightmares that first year of marriage. His reflexive awareness of exits and potential threats. The way he moved when he thought no one was watching. "Mrs. Brooks, the government has evidence of an active conspiracy to expose and eliminate a protected intelligence asset. Someone fed you information designed to turn you against your husband." "Simon," she whispered. "Simon Callahan. He's been helping me understand Jeremy's behavior." McCarthy's expression hardened. "Simon Callahan is your co-conspirator in this case. He's also been arrested." The room spun around Carmen as the pieces fell into place. Simon's careful questions about Jeremy's habits. His gentle suggestions that her husband might be dangerous. The gradual erosion of trust in her 16-year marriage. "I need to speak to my daughter," Carmen said frantically. "Kara doesn't understand what's happening. Your daughter is in protective custody. Given the serious nature of these charges, contact with family members is restricted. 20 miles away, Jeremy sat across from Kara in a safe house, his heart breaking as he watched his daughter's world crumble. She was 15, caught between childhood and adulthood, and the man she'd worshipped her entire life was suddenly a stranger. "You lied to me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "About everything." "I did," Jeremy admitted. "I wanted to give you a normal life. A safe life. But Mom said you were planning to hurt people. The guns, the training, were precautions. Old habits." Jeremy leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Kara, someone manipulated your mother. Used her love for you, her fear for our family, to turn her against me. Simon said you were dangerous." The name confirmed Jeremy's worst fears. "How long have you known about Simon?" Kara's face flushed with shame. 6 months. Mom made me promise not to tell you. She said you'd hurt him if you found out." Jeremy closed his eyes, feeling the last of his restraint snap. Not only had Carmen betrayed their marriage, she'd involved their daughter in the deception, made Kara complicit in the destruction of their family. "What happens now?" Kara asked in a small voice. Jeremy looked at his daughter, his brilliant, innocent daughter who'd been weaponized against him by the two people she trusted most. "Now you learn who your father really is, and why some betrayals can never be forgiven." That evening, Jeremy met with Will Garner and a team of analysts. The war room was familiar. Maps, photos, surveillance equipment. It felt like coming home. "Callahan represents some very dangerous people," Garner began. "Arms dealers, human traffickers, war criminals. 3 of his clients have active contracts on your life. So this was never about Carmen," Jeremy realized. "She was just the easiest way to get to me." "Exactly. Isolate you, discredit you, then eliminate you. Clean and simple." Garner pulled up financial records. "Callahan's been paid $2 million over the past year. Half up front, half on completion." Jeremy studied the intelligence reports with the focused intensity that had made him legendary in the field. He made one mistake. "What's that?" "He involved my family." Jeremy's voice carried the promise of violence. "That makes this personal." Garner recognized the look in his old operative's eyes. It was the same expression Jeremy had worn in Baghdad, in Sarajevo, and a dozen other places where he dispensed justice in the shadows. "What do you need?" "Complete operational freedom. And a new identity for my daughter. She doesn't deserve to pay for her mother's choices." "And Carmen?" Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. "Carmen made her choice when she believed a stranger over 16 years of marriage. She chose her lover over her family. She chose to weaponize our daughter against me." He looked up, and Garner saw no mercy in those cold eyes. "She'll live with the consequences." Chapter 4. The Hunter Awakens. Jeremy Brooks had been sleeping for 15 years. The suburban contractor who worried about mortgage payments and school board meetings was gone, stripped away like a mask that had finally served its purpose. What remained was something far more dangerous, a weapon with 16 years of suppressed fury driving its purpose. The safe house served as his base of operations, a modest ranch home that the agency had equipped with everything he needed. Kara was staying with Carmen's sister in another state, protected by federal marshals who thought they were guarding a witness rather than the daughter of a CIA ghost. Simon Callahan's file made for interesting reading. Harvard law, successful practice, seemingly respectable life. All of it built on a foundation of dirty money and blood. His client list read like a who's who of international criminals. Dmitry Volkov, Jeremy read aloud, studying surveillance photos. Russian arms dealer. Current bid to supply weapons to 3 separate terrorist organizations. Well, Garner nodded. "He's one of the 3 with contracts on your life. You disrupted several of his operations during your active years." Ahmed Hassan. Human trafficking, specifically young girls from Eastern Europe. You killed his brother in Prague. Personal vendetta. And Carlos Mendoza. Drug smuggling and political assassination. You cost him a $100 million cocaine shipment in Colombia. Plus his son died in the explosion. Jeremy set down the files. "So Callahan promises them my head in exchange for a retirement fund. Simple business transaction. Except now we've disrupted his timeline. You're not dead. He's in federal custody, and his clients are getting impatient. A cold smile played across Jeremy's lips. Then we shouldn't keep them waiting. The plan that took shape over the next 3 days was elegant in its simplicity. Jeremy wouldn't just kill his enemies. He'd destroy them utterly, using their own greed and paranoia against them. First, he needed to understand the depth of Carmen's betrayal. The woman he'd loved, trusted, built a life with, she'd handed his location to a man who was paid to kill him. Whether she knew it or not was irrelevant. The result was the same. Through agency surveillance, Jeremy watched his wife in her holding cell. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in the orange jumpsuit that marked her as a federal prisoner. Part of him, the part that still remembered their wedding day, Kara's birth, 16 years of shared history, wanted to protect her. But that part was getting smaller each day. "She's been trying to contact you," Garner reported. 3 letters, dozens of phone requests. Claimed she was manipulated, that she never meant for this to happen. "Intent doesn't matter," Jeremy replied, his voice flat. "She chose to trust him over me. She involved our daughter in a plot to destroy me. Those choices have consequences." Jeremy's transformation was subtle but complete. He moved differently now. Economy of motion, constant environmental awareness, the predatory grace of an apex hunter. His civilian clothes had been replaced with practical gear that could conceal weapons and surveillance equipment. The Jeremy Brooks who built houses was gone. In his place stood something infinitely more dangerous. "What about Callahan?" Garner asked. "He's been moved to a secure facility, maximum security. He won't be there long," Jeremy said with certainty. "His clients need him. They'll break him out within the week." "How can you be sure?" "Because I'm going to help them." Garner stared at his former operative. "That's insane. Why would you help your enemies escape?" Jeremy's smile was winter cold. "Because I can't kill them while they're in federal custody. But once they're free, operating in the shadows where I live best." He shrugged. Different rules apply. The next phase required Jeremy to become someone else entirely. Using skills he developed over 8 years of covert operations, he created a new identity. Marcus Steele, a freelance operative with connections to several criminal organizations. The underground intelligence market was still active, still hungry for information about government operations. Jeremy fed them carefully crafted intelligence about Callahan's arrest, his location, the apparent weaknesses in federal security. Within 48 hours, he'd made contact with representatives from all 3 criminal organizations. They were interested in retrieving their attorney and settling old scores with the man who'd cost them so much. "You sure about this?" Garner asked as Jeremy prepared to meet with Dmitry Volkov's lieutenant. "Once you're in the field, we can't protect you." "I don't need protection," Jeremy replied, checking the concealed weapons that had become as natural as clothing. "I need targets." The meeting took place in a warehouse in Baltimore, the kind of anonymous industrial space where violent men conducted dark business. Jeremy arrived as Marcus Steele, complete with fabricated credentials and a reputation for getting results. Alexei Petrov was Volkov's man in America, brutal, efficient, completely without conscience. He studied Jeremy with the calculating gaze of a professional killer. "You claim to have information about Simon Callahan," Petrov said in accented English. "I know where he's being held, the security protocols, the transfer schedules," Jeremy replied. "More importantly, I know about the man who put him there, the CIA operative. Our employer is very interested in this man, Jeremy Brooks. He's been inactive for 15 years, but he's the one who disrupted your operations in Moscow, Prague, the Ukrainian border." Petrov's eyes hardened. "This Jeremy Brooks cost us much money. Many good men. He's vulnerable now. His cover's blown. His family's turned against him. He'll be isolated, predictable." Jeremy leaned forward. "I can deliver both him and Callahan, but I need assurances about payment." The negotiation that followed was deadly theater. Jeremy played his role perfectly, the amoral operative willing to sell out anyone for the right price. Petrov saw exactly what he expected to see, another American willing to betray his country for money. By the time Jeremy left the warehouse, 3 separate assassination contracts had been placed on his own head, each organization believing they had exclusive rights to his death. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was survive long enough to spring it. Chapter 5. The Bait. The federal transfer was scheduled for dawn, moving Simon Callahan from the maximum security facility to a courthouse in Baltimore for a preliminary hearing. Jeremy had fed the information to all three criminal organizations, each believing they had exclusive intelligence about the route and timing. From his surveillance position in an abandoned office building, Jeremy watched the careful choreography of violence unfold. Dmitry Volkov's team hit the convoy first. 3 black SUVs and a helicopter, military precision. They were intercepted by Ahmed Hassan's men, who'd been lying in wait with rocket-propelled grenades and automatic weapons. The firefight lasted 11 minutes. When the smoke cleared, Callahan was free, and 7 men were dead. Jeremy tracked the escape route through the city, staying invisible while Callahan was passed between criminal organizations like a valuable commodity. Each group thought they were rescuing their attorney. None realized they were being herded toward Jeremy's chosen killing ground. The warehouse district of South Baltimore was a maze of abandoned buildings and forgotten industry, perfect for what Jeremy had planned. He'd spent 2 days preparing the area, placing equipment, identifying escape routes, setting up surveillance networks that would let him track multiple targets simultaneously. Callahan was taken to a secure building 3 blocks from Jeremy's position. Through thermal imaging, he could see 8 guards, armed and alert. The lawyer was scared but alive, probably wondering why his rescue felt more like another kidnapping. The answer came when representatives from all 3 criminal organizations arrived simultaneously. Jeremy watched through high-powered optics as Dmitry Volkov, Ahmed Hassan, and Carlos Mendoza faced each other in the warehouse's central space. 3 of the world's most dangerous men, brought together by their shared hatred for Jeremy Brooks. "Where is the American operative?" Volkov demanded in heavily accented English. "Your man promised to deliver him," Hassan replied, his scarred face twisted with suspicion. "As did yours," Mendoza added, hand resting on his concealed weapon. The meeting devolved into accusations and threats within minutes. Each organization realized they'd been played, but none understood the true scope of Jeremy's manipulation. They thought they were dealing with a rogue operative trying to sell information. They had no idea they were facing a ghost who'd been hunting them for weeks. Jeremy keyed his radio. "Package is delivered," he reported to Will Garner. "All primary targets are in position." "Understood. You have full operational authority." "Copy that." Going dark, Jeremy cut the communication and became what he'd been trained to be, a predator in his natural environment. The first kill was Volkov's sniper, positioned on a rooftop 400 meters away. Jeremy approached from below, climbing the building's maintenance ladder in complete silence. The Russian never knew he was there until Jeremy's knife found the gap between his cervical vertebrae. Hassan's outer perimeter fell next. 2 guards eliminated with suppressed gunshots, their bodies hidden where they wouldn't be discovered until the main operation was complete. Jeremy moved through the warehouse district like a wraith, picking off guards and sentries while the criminal leaders argued inside their supposed sanctuary. Each death brought him closer to the men who'd put a price on his head. By the time the organizations realized they were under attack, Jeremy had reduced their combined forces from 23 men to 7. The survivors retreated to the central warehouse, exactly where Jeremy wanted them. "This is a trap," Hassan snarled, automatic weapon sweeping the shadows. "Someone set us up." "The question is who," Volkov replied, his own men forming a defensive perimeter. Simon Callahan, still handcuffed to a chair in the center of the room, looked between his supposed rescuers with growing terror. "You have to get me out of here. If Jeremy Brooks finds me—" "He's one man," Mendoza interrupted. "We have superior numbers, superior firepower." "You don't understand," Callahan said desperately. "I've studied his files. He's not human. He's something they created, something that doesn't feel fear or mercy or—" The lights went out. In the darkness that followed, Jeremy Brooks became death incarnate. Night vision gave him overwhelming advantage as he moved through the warehouse like a force of nature. The criminals fired blindly, their muzzle flashes revealing their positions while Jeremy remained invisible. Mendoza died first, a blade between his ribs before he could scream. Hassan lasted 30 seconds longer, time enough to realize he was being hunted by something beyond his understanding. Volkov was the most dangerous, a former Spetsnaz operator who understood tactical warfare. He almost made it to the exit before Jeremy's wire garrote ended his threat permanently. When Jeremy restored the lights, only Simon Callahan remained alive in a warehouse full of corpses. "Hello, Simon," Jeremy said conversationally, stepping over Hassan's body. "We need to talk." Callahan's expensive suit was stained with sweat and terror. "Jeremy, please. I can explain everything. Your wife." "My wife believed you over me," Jeremy interrupted, pulling up a chair. "My daughter thinks I'm a monster because of the lies you told. My family was destroyed because you needed to collect a bounty. It wasn't personal. It was just business. You made it personal when you involved Carmen and Kara." Jeremy's voice was deadly quiet. "When you turned my own family into weapons against me." Callahan's facade of control crumbled completely. "What do you want? Money? I have accounts in Switzerland, the Caymans. $20 million, all yours." "I don't want your money, Simon. I want something much more valuable." "What?" Jeremy smiled, and Callahan saw his own death reflected in those cold eyes. "I want you to understand the price of betrayal." Chapter 6, The Reckoning. Simon Callahan had defended killers, rapists, and war criminals throughout his career. He thought he understood evil, thought he'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. But sitting chained in the abandoned warehouse, watching Jeremy Brooks methodically clean blood from his hands, Callahan realized he'd been wrong. Evil was a hurricane, destructive but random. What faced him now was something far worse. Justice without mercy, delivered by a man who'd been pushed beyond all limits. 16 years, Jeremy said conversationally, settling into his chair. 16 years I spent building a life with Carmen, being a father to Kara, believing in the illusion of safety, of normal. "Jeremy, if you let me go, I can fix this. I can make Carmen understand." Carmen understood perfectly. Jeremy's voice cut through Callahan's plea like a blade. She understood that a stranger was more trustworthy than her husband. She understood that our daughter should help destroy me. Those were conscious choices. Callahan's breathing became rapid, shallow. She was protecting Kara. "I convinced her you were dangerous." "I am dangerous," Jeremy agreed. "But never to them, never to my family." He leaned forward, and Callahan shrank back, until they chose to become my enemies. The psychological torture that followed was methodical, surgical. Jeremy didn't need to inflict physical pain. Fear was a much more effective weapon. He described in clinical detail how each of Callahan's clients had died, the terror in their eyes when they realized they'd been hunted by a superior predator. "Volkov tried to call for help," Jeremy continued. "Kept reaching for his satellite phone, even as I cut his throat. Hassan actually begged at the end, offered me his entire organization if I'd just let him live." What do you want from me?" "Information. The complete truth about your relationship with Carmen. Every conversation, every lie you told her, every method you used to turn her against me." Over the next 4 hours, Callahan confessed everything. How he'd researched Jeremy's background, identified the CIA connection, realized the potential value of his target's location. The systematic seduction of Carmen, not sexual at first, but emotional, psychological. She was lonely, Callahan admitted. You worked long hours, came home tired. She needed someone to talk to, someone who understood her fears. So you became that person. I listened. I validated her concerns. I made her feel important, understood. Callahan's voice grew stronger as he retreated into familiar territory. The manipulation that was his true skill. When she mentioned your nightmares, your reflexive awareness of threats, I helped her interpret those signs as evidence that I was dangerous, as evidence that you were hiding something, which you were. Callahan looked up, meeting Jeremy's eyes for the first time. She wasn't wrong to be suspicious. You lied to her every day for 16 years. Jeremy absorbed this without reaction. When did the affair become physical? 3 months ago. She was emotionally ready, convinced that her marriage was a lie, that you were someone she couldn't trust. Callahan's confidence was returning. She came to me willingly, Jeremy. I didn't force anything. You manipulated a vulnerable woman into betraying her family. I gave her what she needed: honesty, attention, someone who didn't lie to her about who he was. Jeremy stood up, walked to the window overlooking the Baltimore harbor. Dawn was breaking over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Somewhere in the distance, his daughter was waking up in protective custody, probably wondering if she'd ever see her father again. There's something you need to understand about Carmen, Jeremy said finally. About the woman you think you seduced. Callahan waited, confused by the change in tone. She knew. Knew what? What I was. What I'd done. Not the specifics, but she knew I'd been something other than a soldier. Jeremy turned back, and Callahan saw something new in his expression: pain, raw and fresh. She chose to forget because she loved me, because she wanted the life we built together. That's impossible. If she'd known. She found my go-bag in the 3rd year of our marriage. False passports, unmarked weapons, $50,000 in untraceable cash. She never said a word, never asked questions. Just put it back where she found it and pretended it didn't exist. Callahan's face went pale. You're lying. She knew I had nightmares about people I'd killed. She knew I checked locks obsessively, mapped escape routes wherever we went. She knew I could disappear into shadows when I chose to. Jeremy's voice broke slightly. And she loved me anyway, until you convinced her that love was weakness. The truth hit Callahan like a physical blow. Carmen hadn't been an innocent victim manipulated by a predator. She'd been a woman who chose to abandon 16 years of love and trust because a stranger told her she deserved better. What happens now? Callahan whispered. Jeremy checked his watch. Now you disappear. You're going to kill me. No, Jeremy said simply. You're going to wish I had. Chapter 7. The Price of Betrayal. When Carmen Brooks saw Jeremy enter the federal visiting room, she barely recognized the man she'd married. Gone was the gentle contractor who'd coached their daughter's soccer team and worried about property taxes. In his place sat a stranger, cold, controlled, radiating barely contained violence. 16 years, he said without preamble, settling into the chair across from her. That's how long we were married before you decided a stranger was more trustworthy than your husband. Carmen's face was haggard from weeks in federal custody, her usual composure shattered. Jeremy, please. I was trying to protect Kara. Simon made me believe. Simon told you what you wanted to hear, Jeremy interrupted. That I was dangerous. That our marriage was built on lies. That you deserve better. Didn't I? Carmen's voice cracked. Didn't I deserve to know who I really married? What you'd done before we met? Jeremy studied his wife's face, looking for any trace of the woman he'd loved. You knew, Carmen. You've always known. That's not true. You lied to me. I omitted details. There's a difference. Jeremy leaned forward slightly. You found my emergency kit in 2008. February 14th, Valentine's Day. You were looking for your anniversary present in my closet. Carmen's face went white. How did you? Because I noticed. The way you looked at me for weeks afterward. The careful questions about my military service. The way you started paying attention to things you'd ignored for years. The memory hit Carmen like a physical blow. She'd found the bag behind Jeremy's winter clothes. False passports, weapons, money, things that belonged in spy novels, not suburban closets. She'd been terrified, confused, but ultimately chose love over fear. I chose to trust you, she whispered, until Simon Callahan gave you permission to stop. He showed me what you really were. He showed you what he needed you to see. Jeremy's voice remained steady, controlled. A successful attorney with connections to international criminals. A man who was paid $2 million to deliver my location to people who want me dead. Carmen stared at him in shock. That's impossible. Simon loves me. He wants to build a life. Simon Callahan has 3 Swiss bank accounts, a villa in the Cayman Islands, and a wife in Argentina he's never divorced. Jeremy pulled out a tablet, swiped through surveillance photos. He's been married 4 times, always to lonely women with access to valuable targets. The photos showed Simon with other women, intimate moments, romantic dinners, the same attention and care he'd shown Carmen. In each image, he wore the same expression of calculated affection. "You're lying," Carmen said desperately. "These could be faked." He was never planning to leave his wife, Carmen. He was never planning to marry you. He was paid to seduce you, to turn you against me, to deliver my family as weapons to be used in my destruction. Jeremy watched his wife process the information, watched her 16-year marriage crumble alongside her newfound love. For a moment, he felt pity for the woman who'd shared his bed, raised his daughter, been his partner in building their life. Then he remembered Kara's tear-stained face, her accusations of betrayal, her willingness to help destroy the father she'd worshipped. The pity hardened into something colder. "What happens to Kara?" Carmen asked in a broken voice. "Kara will be fine. She's innocent in this. A child manipulated by adults who should have protected her." Jeremy's expression softened slightly when he spoke of their daughter. "She'll have a new identity, a new life somewhere safe. The agency will make sure she has everything she needs. And me, you'll serve your sentence. Conspiracy against a federal agent carries 5 to 10 years, depending on cooperation and demonstrated remorse." Carmen looked up sharply. "You could get me out of this. You have influence now." "I could," Jeremy agreed. "But I won't. I'm your wife." "You were my wife," Jeremy corrected. "The woman I married would never have believed a stranger over 16 years of marriage. The woman I married would never have used our daughter as a weapon against me." "Jeremy, please. I made a mistake. I was lonely, confused." "You made choices," Jeremy said flatly. "And choices have consequences." He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "There's something else you should know about your lover." Carmen looked up desperately, grasping for any scrap of hope. "He's dead." The words hit Carmen like a physical blow. "What?" "Simon Callahan died 3 days ago. Officially, it was a heart attack brought on by stress and poor health. The autopsy will show massive cardiac failure, completely natural causes." "You killed him." "I gave him a choice," Jeremy said calmly. "Confess everything, every lie he told you, every method he used to manipulate our family, or face the same fate as his clients." And he confessed. "Then I injected him with a synthetic compound that mimics natural heart failure. Untraceable, undetectable. He had about 30 seconds to realize what was happening before his heart stopped." Carmen stared at the man she'd married, seeing him clearly for the first time in years. This wasn't the gentle contractor who'd built their dream house. This was something far more dangerous. A predator who'd been playing house until his family forced him to remember what he really was. "The Jeremy I married wouldn't have done this," she whispered. "The Jeremy you married never existed," he replied. "You fell in love with a mask, a performance designed to let me live a normal life. But you chose to believe that mask was a lie, that the real me was something to be feared. I was wrong. Yes, you were. About everything that mattered." Jeremy opened the door, stepped into the hallway. "Goodbye, Carmen. I hope your choices were worth the price you're paying." As he walked away, Carmen called out desperately, "What about us? What about our family?" Jeremy paused without turning around. "We never had a family. We had an illusion built on love and trust. You destroyed that illusion when you chose to believe that love was weakness. I still love you." Now Jeremy did turn, and Carmen saw her own death reflected in his eyes. Not physical death, something worse. The complete absence of any feeling, any connection, any trace of the man who'd held her during thunderstorms and promised to love her forever. "Love without trust is just manipulation," he said quietly. "You taught me that." Chapter 8. Ashes and Aftermath. The house in Arlington stood empty, a monument to 16 years of shared history, now reduced to legal proceedings and property division. Jeremy walked through rooms that had once been filled with laughter, love, and the ordinary magic of family life. Kara's bedroom remained untouched. Posters of pop stars, soccer trophies, the detritus of a 15-year-old's life interrupted by adult betrayal. Jeremy found himself standing in the doorway, remembering bedtime stories and homework, help, and all the small moments that had made him believe in happiness. Second thoughts. Will Garner appear beside him, studying the family photos that still line the hallway walls? No, Jeremy replied, his voice steady. Just saying goodbye. They've been summoned by Kara, who is now living under federal protection in Seattle. New name, new school, new life. Everything the agency could provide to help her heal from the trauma of discovering her father was someone else entirely. The flight west gave Jeremy time to prepare for what might be the most difficult conversation of his life. How do you explain to a 15-year-old that her mother's love had been real but insufficient? That her father's lies had been necessary protection? That family was as fragile as it was precious? Kara was waiting in a small apartment overlooking Puget Sound, guarded by agents who thought they were protecting a witness rather than the daughter of a legend. She'd grown thinner during their separation, older somehow, as if betrayal aged you in ways that time couldn't. "Hello, sweetheart," Jeremy said, settling into the chair across from her. "Mom's in prison because of you." No greeting, no pretense of warmth. Kara's accusation hung in the air like a blade. "Mom's in prison because of choices she made," Jeremy corrected gently. "She chose to trust a stranger over her family. She chose to believe that our marriage was built on lies instead of love. Because it was built on lies." Kara's voice cracked with emotion. "You're not a construction worker. You're some kind of spy or assassin or—" "I'm your father," Jeremy interrupted. "Everything else is just what I did before you were born." Kara stared at him, searching his face for traces of the man who'd taught her to ride a bike and attended every soccer game. "Who are you really?" Jeremy considered his answer carefully. "I'm someone who did terrible things in service of his country. Someone who killed people to protect innocent lives. Someone who walked away from that life because he fell in love with your mother and wanted to be better than what he'd been. And now I'm someone whose family was destroyed by people who couldn't accept that love might be enough to change a man." Kara was quiet for a long moment, processing information that most adults couldn't fully comprehend. "Did you really kill Simon?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because he used your mother's love as a weapon against our family. Because he convinced you to help destroy the life we'd built together. Because some betrayals can't be forgiven." "What about Mom? Will you forgive her?" Jeremy looked out at the Sound, watching ferries carry people toward new destinations, new possibilities. "Your mother chose to believe that 16 years of love and trust meant nothing compared to the word of a stranger. That's not a mistake, Kara. That's a fundamental rejection of who we were as a family. So you'll just abandon her? Leave her in prison? I'll make sure she's safe, that she has everything she needs. But I can't forgive someone who chose to stop believing in us." Kara's tears came then. 16 years of love and security reduced to legal documents and federal protection. Jeremy wanted to comfort her, to promise that somehow their family could be rebuilt, but he'd learned the price of impossible promises. "What happens to me?" she asked through her tears. "You build a new life. You remember that your parents loved you, even when they couldn't love each other. You choose to be better than the circumstances that destroyed your family." "I don't want a new life. I want my old life back." "So did I," Jeremy admitted. "But that life was built on the assumption that love and trust were the same thing. Your mother taught us they're not." Jeremy spent 3 days in Seattle, helping Kara begin the process of healing. They talked about her future, college, career possibilities, the life she could build with the resources the agency would provide. Slowly, she began to understand that survival sometimes meant accepting loss. On his last day, they walked along the waterfront, father and daughter navigating a relationship redefined by betrayal and revelation. "Will I see you again?" Kara asked as they stood at the ferry terminal. "When you're ready," Jeremy promised. "When you've decided whether you can love a father who's done terrible things, who's capable of terrible things." "I already know," Kara said quietly. Jeremy waited, afraid of her answer. "I love you," she said simply. "I don't understand you, and I'm scared of what you've done, but you're still my dad. That has to count for something." Jeremy pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling tears he hadn't shed in 15 years. In that moment, he realized that some things could survive even the complete destruction of family. Love, without illusion, acceptance without conditions, hope without guarantees. It counts for everything, he whispered. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 1 year later, Jeremy Brooks officially ceased to exist. The man who'd built houses in Arlington, coached Little League, and attended PTA meetings disappeared into the bureaucratic maze of false deaths and assumed identities. In his place, Marcus Kane emerged, a private security consultant with an impeccable reputation and a talent for solving problems that traditional law enforcement couldn't touch. His first client was a tech billionaire whose daughter had been kidnapped by a human trafficking ring. His second was a journalist being stalked by war criminals she'd exposed. Word spread quickly through the networks where dangerous people sought solutions to impossible problems. Marcus Kane was expensive, discreet, and utterly ruthless when protecting his clients. He never failed, never left witnesses, never asked questions about the legality of his methods. Jeremy had found his purpose again, stripped of illusions about family and love and the possibility of normal life. He was what he'd always been, a weapon pointed at the darkness that thrived in society's shadows. Carmen served 18 months of her 5-year sentence before being released on good behavior. The woman who emerged from federal prison was hollow-eyed and broken, haunted by the recognition that her choices had destroyed everything she'd claimed to value. She tried to contact Jeremy through lawyers, through mutual friends, through letters that went unanswered. She spoke of forgiveness, of second chances, of a love that had sustained them for 16 years. But Marcus Kane felt nothing for the stranger who'd once been his wife. The house in Arlington sold for market value. The proceeds split according to the divorce decree that Jeremy had never bothered to contest. Carmen used her half to buy a small apartment in Richmond, where she worked as a night shift nurse and tried to rebuild some semblance of purpose. She dated occasionally, men who didn't ask too many questions about her past, who were content with the version of herself she was willing to share. But late at night, alone in her narrow bed, she remembered the man who'd held her during thunderstorms and wondered if love without trust could ever truly be love at all. Kara thrived in Seattle, attending university on a full scholarship provided by a CIA-front organization. She studied international relations and psychology, drawn to understanding the forces that shaped human behavior. Her professors saw promise in the serious young woman who wrote papers about the nature of betrayal and the psychology of deception. She kept in touch with Jeremy through encrypted communications, their relationship slowly rebuilding on a foundation of honesty rather than illusion. He visited twice a year, always careful to maintain his cover identity, always respectful of the life she was building without him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked during one of their walks through Pike Place Market. "Giving up everything for revenge?" Jeremy considered the question seriously. "I didn't give up everything for revenge, sweetheart. I gave up the illusion of everything to preserve what actually mattered, which is you. The knowledge that you're safe, that you're building something real with your life. The certainty that the people who tried to use our family as a weapon can never hurt anyone else." Kara nodded, understanding more each year about the man her father had become, and perhaps had always been. "Do you think you'll ever find peace?" "I am at peace," Jeremy replied. "Not the peace I thought I wanted, but the peace that comes from accepting who you really are." On a cold December evening, Marcus Kane sat in his Washington apartment, reading intelligence reports about his next assignment. A senator's wife had been threatened by arms dealers angry about her husband's vote on military contracts. The threats were serious, professional, backed by men who killed as casually as others changed clothes. His phone rang. Kara, calling from Seattle, her voice bright with excitement about her upcoming graduation, her acceptance to graduate school, the life she was building from the ashes of their family's destruction. After they hung up, Jeremy stared out at the city lights, thinking about the man he'd been and the man he'd become. Carmen had been right about one thing. The Jeremy Brooks who'd built their house in Arlington wouldn't have done the things Marcus Kane did routinely. But that Jeremy Brooks had been a performance, a mask worn by someone who'd forgotten what he really was. Carmen's betrayal had simply stripped away the illusion, revealing the predator that domesticity had never quite tamed. He didn't mourn the life they'd lost. because it had been built on a foundation of half-truths and willful blindness. What he'd found in its place was something more honest. Purpose without pretense, love without conditions, justice without compromise. Some men were meant for suburban happiness, for family barbecues and soccer games, and growing old with the woman they'd married. Jeremy had tried to be that man and nearly convinced himself it was possible. But some betrayals burned away everything false, leaving only what was real. And what was real about Jeremy Brooks was his capacity for violence in service of something larger than himself, whether that was country, family, or the innocent people who needed someone willing to walk into darkness on their behalf. The phone rang again. A new client, a new problem, a new opportunity to be what he'd always been. Jeremy answered on the second ring, his voice professional and calm. "Marcus Kane, how can I help you?" As he listened to the details of another impossible situation, another family threatened by forces beyond their understanding, Jeremy felt the familiar satisfaction of purpose. This was who he was, not the suburban contractor who'd been Jeremy Brooks, but the ghost who protected people from monsters. And sometimes, late at night, when the work was done and the monsters were eliminated, he thought about a 15-year-old girl in Seattle who loved her father despite understanding what he was capable of. That love, honest, clear-eyed, accepting, was worth more than 16 years of illusion. It was worth everything he'd lost and everything he'd gained by losing it. In the end, that was enough.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.